So that quick composition was a demonstration of Virtual Guitarist Silk in action. So what is Virtual Guitarist Silk? Well, you've heard of the other Virtual Guitarist plugins. They are Virtual Guitarist Amber, which is a steel-strung acoustic guitar, Virtual Guitarist Sparkle, which is an electric 6-string guitar, and Virtual Guitarist Iron, which is a rock and metal guitar. As Silk would imply, this is a little bit softer and it's a nylon strung guitar. So without any further ado, I'll just flip to the Silk channel in Cubase and give you a little run through what Silk has to offer. The screen on Silk, as you can see in front of you, is very much like the interfaces of the other Virtual Guitarist instruments, in that you can choose from the top here a preset, and there's a lot of presets built in here, and I'll explain what a preset is in a second, but essentially it allows you to select some kind of default settings. Underneath that you've got a style menu, and from the style menu you can choose one of many different styles that have been programmed in. Essentially these are real guitarists playing various styles of music, and they run from the standard kind of 70s folk, country, arpeggiated arpeggios, etc., etc. And they can scroll through there. So let's just go back to Bossa Nova. And then above here, you've got the chord detection system. And then below this, you've got these 3 octaves down the bottom and the 2 octaves, or 2 and a bit octaves up the top, which are your key switches and chord controls. So on the left-hand side, you've got the common phrases, and they are selected using the bottom octave of this keyboard. And you can see the common phrases will appear in all of the instruments, rather like with the Virtual Guitarist Amber, Iron and Sparkle. So these are common phrases they expect you to use regularly, and they include gentle strumming, starts and stops, etc. The next octave up, which is this one here from C2 up to B2, is the style phrases. These are the phrases that correspond to the style you've selected. So you've got a selection here, an octave, chromatic, you can select all of these keys, and the last one here is the stop button. You can see it's a momentary switch. It just stops playing whatever you're playing and mutes the guitar. This is a new feature of Virtual Guitarist Silk, and it's the bass notes feature. The bass notes run from C3 up to B3, and they allow you to choose the bass note of each of the chords you're playing in your right hand. So for instance, if you're playing a chord of C, you could move your bass from C to E to G, and it'll just change the bass of the chord. You'll hear in a minute with most of the styles that they've recorded for this instrument, this lends itself very well to that kind of strumming format, especially as many of the instruments for this aren't strummed, they're actually picked and plucked. So you'll hear that in a minute. So that's the bass notes, and up here from C4 up to E6, that allows you to play your chords. So you select a chord of C major, a triad of three major, and it'll play a chord of C major. Choose a chord of F minor, etc. So you've got a really great way of playing chords, selecting your bass note, and then switching using key switches, the style phrases and the common phrases. So what does this sound like? Well, let's not use the Bossa Nova. We've just heard what that does. Let's go to easy 70s folk, and we'll have a little listen to what this sounds like. Down the bottom we've got fret noise, doubling, delay, reverb, a kind of attack envelope as well as the volume. We'll talk about what the other ones are in a minute, but I'm going to turn down the delay for a second just so we've got a much clearer sound. I'm going to turn the reverb down a bit as well. So this is the 70s folk. I'm just going to choose C2, which is the default number 1 style phrase. Now the bass notes. So you can hear there I was modulating from a G minor to an F minor, and then I was introducing the different bass notes using the left hand. You can hear that was a very, very elegantly plucked little folk recording, just using the basic standard phrase there. It's a lovely nylon sound, it's a beautifully recorded instrument. It is very dry, which is exactly what you want for this kind of instrument, to be able to then add your own effects or add the effects that are built in to the machine itself. But actually it's a really quite attractive nylon strung guitar. So what other phrases do you have here? It would take me all night to go through every single phrase that this has to offer. But if I just play you the options for this one, which is the early 70s or the easy 70s folk, just for an example, and I'm just going to play a single chord of A minor 7. So you can see I went through the whole octave there, and there were some really subtle variations. You probably noticed during that playing that there was some tempo variation. It wasn't always at the same steady state, steady tempo. And that's because over on the right-hand side here, you've got some controls that will change the feel of the sound. You've got swing. Add that little bit of swing to it. You've got timing variations. So it's very tight now. Everything's like a quantized guitar track. And you can hear with the loose selected, there's a lot of variation in the timing. The feel is difficult to explain without a beat playing, but the feel brings the rhythm in front or after the beat. It's very subtle, but in a long piece where you've got this steady, quantized sounding, arpeggiated guitar, it's nice to be able to bring the feel, pushing and pulling it back. And of course you can just right-click on all of these controls and learn a MIDI CC. The last control at the top here is the variance. This isn't, as the swing, feel and timing is, anything to do with the pitch or the tempo or the pitch. It's actually got a lot to do with the sound. So it's actually choosing a variation, a kind of a deep tone full to a bright tone. I'll just play what that sounds like using the same chords. So we'll start off with what they call steady. Just sounds like a microphoned guitar. And then we'll move it up to vivid. You can hear that it's like some little fairy in the background is adjusting an EQ and giving it a little bit more brightness. But we'll leave that back in the middle again. Down the bottom of the window, we've got some more selectors, and just like the other virtual guitarist sounds that are on offer from this company, we can select some other things that will modulate the sound itself. The first is the position. This is an obvious one for an acoustic guitar. You can move towards the neck, or you can move towards the bridge in where you are plucking. And I'll just show the two extremes of that. Let's just change to a different sound. Let's go to country, and we'll choose the default. So this will be the neck picking for this style. Oh my goodness. So this will be the neck picking for this style. Move towards the bridge. You can hear the tone changing. So let's put it back in the middle. Selecting a different phrase now, we'll move over to character. So character is essentially an EQ. I think it's doing a little bit more than just EQing, but you've got selection from rich, full, original, which is the original recording, bright and sheen. So towards this end it's a fatter, more mid-tone, and towards the bottom end here it's a brighter tone. And you'll hear what that sounds like now. This is rich and full. bit more bass in there. The original. Now bright. And finally sheen. So you can hear there is applying some EQ essentially to the character of the sound. This was recorded with two microphones, which they've labelled A and B. And over here in the mic switch, you can choose between each of these variations. So this is microphone A. Let's just change the phrase. This is microphone A. Microphone B. Slightly different tone. Now we can mix them together. And then A and B in the left and right speaker. And then B and A in the left and right speaker. So using the A/B, which puts A to the left and B to the right speaker, it gives you a lovely sense of stereo feel, whereas A and B seem to be a much more monophonic recording. So let's leave it on BA for the moment and move to the animate. Animate doesn't mean bounce around all excitedly. Animate means add a little bit of movement to the sound. For those of you who remember the Juno 106 and those other old Roland keyboards that had that wonderful Dimension D chorus effect in it, this is pretty much what this animate is doing. If you have a listen to it, I'll put it back on one of the A mics. If you have a listen to what this is doing, you'll hear what animate is doing to the sound. So I've turned it off for the moment. I'm going to slowly sweep it in. You probably noticed there it's kind of sounding a little bit phasey, a little bit chorusy. It's got some harmonics in there as well. So it's got something clever going on under the hood that just adds a little bit of harmonic depth to the sound you're creating. Let's turn the animate off. Down the bottom here, we've got the final controls. We've got control of fret noise. We've got a doubling effect. And we've got delay, reverb, and attack simulator, which essentially puts in a ADSR on your sound and the master volume. Doubling does exactly what it says on the tin. It just widens the whole sound. So just have a listen to that. We're doubling off and doubling on. Doubling off and doubling on. So you can hear the doubling really does what it says on the tin. Here you've got the delay function where you've got a choice between 30 seconds, 16th dotted, 8ths, 8th dotted, and quarter notes. And you can just wind up the delay accordingly. And it does what it's supposed to do. The reverb has only one setting. It's either down or middle or up. So you're just going to roll the slider and you can hear the different reverb coming in as you push it up. And then totally dry. And finally the attack, push the attack right up. You can hear it's got a very sharp attack to it. And bring the attack down. You can hear the attack of the sound is changing. So with all these controls, you've got a great deal of control over the characteristics of the sound. And to add to that, and this isn't enough for you, you've also got a speed control. So for each of the sounds, you can turn it slower. Normal speed or double speed. Why you'd need that kind of phrase at double speed, I have no idea. But I can imagine if you've recorded a piece at 50 beats a minute, for instance, and you want that kind of arpeggio a bit quicker, you could use a doubler to make it sound a little bit quicker to fit the mix. The final control, which is not mentioned on the screen anywhere, it's kind of hidden away, is the modulation lever. The modulation lever, if you push it forward, will mute the sound, and then pull it back, it'll return the open strings. So let's just use that on that exact same phrase. I'm pushing the modulation lever forward. So you can hear there you've got a lot of options to sculpt your sound. So what else can this do? You've heard really pretty much a couple of arpeggios being played at the moment. Going through some of the different options here, we've got folk, lots of folk, pop ballads, power chords. Let's just go to power chords and play some chords here. So you've got the option to play pretty much any chord you like, and you can just choose the style you want. It's got some 3/4, it's got some 6/8, it's even got some 7/8, they call advanced pop. You've got some reggae, you've got some just picks, you've got some pop, and you've got some other things that are just labelled groove, etc., etc. So it's got a lot to offer. Of course, unlike instruments that you can play individual notes from, so it's normal multi-sample instruments, you can't make your own up. What you've got here is what you've got. But there is quite a lot of variation here, and because for each style you choose, you've got an octave of style phrases plus the octave of common phrases. It offers quite a lot of sound. So what are these common phrases? They use these in the other sample libraries too to great effect. Simply playing quarter notes or eighth notes is something that you don't want to waste a style on. So let's just see what they've got. I'm just going to play a chord of G and see what the common phrases are, starting with the bottom note. So the bottom note is silence, as it says. Note up. Single strummed chord, no repeats, nothing clever. Hit the note, it strums a chord. D, it's a down strum. And you can hear when I take my fingers off, there's that fret noise. Turn that off. Still there. So it's a release noise, not a fret noise. That's great. We've then got E flat. Nice strummed chord. E. Nice and simple. You have to be fairly careful when pressing keys that you make sure you hold the keys you want and don't make mistakes. If you're indecisive about what you want to play, practice first, because as you heard me just doing there, you can make a few little glitches if you just get a bit excited and play incidental notes by mistake. This is F. So again, this is another thing to bear in mind. You have to hit all three notes at the same time, or things go a little bit strange. Just playing one note plays a chord of F major, but if I hit the F and the A together, or the F and the C, and I release the F, you can see it's resorting to a chord of C. So my advice, if you want to play major chords, just play single notes. If you want to play inversions, play the inversions up the octave. If you want to play minors, play the root and the minor third. If you want to play sevenths, play the triad with the seventh, and you should go about right. F sharp. Nice and simple. The G. We're building up arpeggios here. The A flat. The A. See, this would sound good with some muting. Now the B flat. This one appears to play one note. And then finally the B. Plays the bass note. So the one before probably plays the top note of each triad. So you've got those common phrases, and of course you could use them to end a tune just by simply playing a chord at the end. So the opportunities are great. It takes a bit of practice getting used to it. If you grew up in the 80s with those wonderful Casio tone keyboards where you had to use your left hand to play chords and your right hand to play melodies, this kind of thing suits you well because you're used to this kind of playing triads and playing the rest. If you're not used to playing triads or not used to playing two-note chords and bass lines, it gets a bit fiddly. You have to remember where you are on the keyboard, and if you move off the keyboard, it all goes a bit strange. If you've got one of the Native Instruments keyboards, this supports the Native Instruments keyboards, so you'll be able to see the lights on the keys telling you which are key switches and which are chord different colors. So that's really useful. It seems to work very well alongside the other virtual guitarist instruments, and I'm going to do a little demo in a second where I'm going to use sparkle, silk and amber in a single piece. So I hope this has helped you see what silk can do. I've only really dipped under the hood very slightly, but you can see the sculpting possibilities are pretty impressive.